At first glance, the avoidant and the empath seem like polar opposites. The avoidant runs when things get too close, while the empath leans in with open arms, ready to love. And yet, these two often find each other. Why? Because the avoidant is drawn, almost magnetically, to the empath's warmth. The empath makes them feel safe in a world where closeness usually feels like danger. It's intoxicating. The avoidant might never admit it, but that warmth is the one thing they can't quite create on their own. Now here's the paradox. While the avoidant is pushing away, testing, pulling back, the empath continues to pour love, patience, and understanding into the relationship. And for a while, the avoidant gets to have it both ways: closeness without fully committing, love without full vulnerability. But here's the truth every avoidant eventually faces when the empath finally recognizes their worth, when they finally draw a boundary, when they finally stop giving all that unconditional warmth. The avoidant is left in the cold. And no one fears that cold more than the person who's been secretly addicted to the fire of an empath's love. It's not the rejection they fear. It's not even the breakup. It's losing the rare presence of someone who offered warmth without conditions, love without games, and acceptance without judgment. Because once an empath pulls away, that warmth doesn't come back. And the avoidant knows it. The avoidant is magnetically drawn to the empath's warmth because deep down, it offers them something they rarely, if ever, allow themselves to feel: safety. For someone who identifies with avoidant patterns, intimacy feels dangerous, closeness feels suffocating, vulnerability feels like stepping onto a battlefield without armor. So they spend much of their life keeping relationships at arm's length, convincing themselves they don't need much, don't want much, and are better off being self-sufficient. On the surface, this looks like independence and control. Underneath, however, there's a quiet hunger for the kind of connection they've been too afraid to lean into. When they encounter the super empath, that hunger gets stirred in ways they can't always explain. The empath radiates warmth, not just in words or gestures, but in presence. They make the avoidant feel seen, not judged. They create a space where emotions aren't weaponized but welcomed. For the avoidant, this feels both foreign and irresistible. They are drawn to it like someone standing outside in the cold, suddenly catching the scent of a fire burning inside. The warmth promises relief, yet entering the firelight requires lowering defenses. That tension is what makes the avoidant simultaneously crave and resist the empath's closeness. The empath's warmth also carries an energy that cuts through the avoidant's internal narrative. The avoidant often believes no one could truly accept them if they revealed their flaws, fears, or inconsistencies. Yet, when faced with an empath who listens deeply, cares unconditionally, and embraces even the parts of them they've tried to hide, something shifts inside. It unsettles their old survival patterns. The avoidant is used to relationships that confirm their fear of rejection. The empath flips that script, offering love without demanding perfection. It's this contrast that keeps the avoidant tethered, even as they pretend to detach. There's also a quiet addiction that forms. The avoidant, though resistant to closeness, begins to notice how calm they feel in the empath's presence, how their own edges soften, how the world feels less hostile when the empath is near. They might not articulate it, but they feel it. And it's precisely because this feeling is rare that they can't help but gravitate back again and again. No matter how much they push away, something about the empath's warmth calls them home. But it's not just comfort that draws them, it's healing. The empath doesn't just soothe the avoidant's fears, they reflect back a version of intimacy the avoidant secretly longs for but doesn't know how to sustain. Every small act of kindness, every patient gesture, every moment of steady presence cracks the armor a little more. The avoidant sees, in the empath, a kind of love that feels almost supernatural in its steadiness. And once they've tasted it, even if they run, even if they deny it, they know they've experienced something rare. That magnetic pull isn't about convenience or habit. It's about a soul-level recognition that the empath's warmth offers the very thing they've always feared, yet always needed. The empath offers what the avoidant cannot create alone, because the emotional atmosphere the empath brings into a relationship is something the avoidant has never been able to cultivate within themselves. Avoidant individuals often pride themselves on being self-sufficient, on carrying their own weight without leaning on anyone. On the outside, this looks like strength, but in truth, it is often a coping mechanism designed to protect them from the vulnerability of needing others. The problem is that when you're always guarding against intimacy, you end up missing out on the warmth and depth that only comes from genuine connection. This is where the empath becomes irreplaceable. The empath creates a space that is saturated with acceptance. They have an ability to welcome another person's emotions without judgment, to sit with the messiness of someone's inner world without recoiling. For the avoidant, this is nothing short of revolutionary. They have spent much of their life expecting others to demand too much, to criticize, or to weaponize vulnerability against them. Yet with the empath, there's none of that. The empath doesn't push them to be perfect or to show up in a way that feels unnatural. Instead, they communicate through patience, care, and subtle reassurance that it's safe to be real. This atmosphere cannot be replicated by the avoidant on their own because it requires a level of emotional openness they've always feared. It's not just acceptance that the empath offers, it's warmth. Their presence feels like a steady flame that doesn't flicker when the avoidant withdraws or tests boundaries. Where most people might become frustrated or impatient with the avoidant's distance, the empath remains calm, grounded, and present. That consistency creates a sense of stability the avoidant has rarely experienced. It tells them, without words, "I'm not leaving just because you're afraid." For someone used to relationships that collapse when things get hard, that kind of steadiness is profoundly disarming. The empath also has the unique ability to reflect back to the avoidant a vision of themselves they can't see alone. When the avoidant begins to withdraw, self-sabotage, or minimize their needs, the empath doesn't just accept it as truth. Instead, they gently challenge it by showing, through their actions, that the avoidant is worthy of care and connection. This reflection allows the avoidant to glimpse the possibility of a different kind of relationship, one where closeness isn't a trap, but a source of healing. The avoidant cannot create this perspective on their own because their inner lens is clouded by old fears and self-protection. The empath becomes the mirror that helps them see what they've been blind to. More than anything, the empath brings emotional generosity. They give without calculating, they care without keeping score, and they love without conditions. For the avoidant, who is often locked in a mindset of scarcity when it comes to love, this abundance is almost shocking. It feels like a new language, one they've never learned but desperately need. And once they've experienced it, no matter how much they fight it or deny it, they know it's something they could never have built within themselves alone. The avoidant often takes the empath's warmth for granted because, in their mind, it feels like something that will always be there. The empath is naturally giving, naturally patient, naturally willing to extend love beyond what most people can tolerate. For the avoidant, who is accustomed to keeping emotional distance, this becomes both a comfort and a trap. They grow used to the idea that no matter how much they withdraw, test, or create space, the empath will still be standing there, arms open, ready to welcome them back. This illusion of endless availability makes it easy for the avoidant to undervalue what they are receiving, even while depending on it more than they realize. At the core of this dynamic is the avoidant's fear of intimacy colliding with the empath's instinct to nurture. The avoidant pushes away when things feel too close, not out of malice, but out of survival. The empath responds with understanding, often interpreting the distance as a call to love harder, to soothe more deeply, to prove that they are safe. Over time, this pattern convinces the avoidant that they can oscillate between connection and withdrawal without truly losing the empath. They begin to assume that the warmth is unconditional in a way that requires no reciprocity, no change, and no accountability on their part. The danger of this assumption is that it blinds the avoidant to the rarity of what they have. Most people would not tolerate being tested repeatedly or pushed away only to be pulled close again. The empath, however, continues to show up with compassion and patience, and this consistency becomes the very thing the avoidant starts to overlook. The more reliable the empath's love becomes, the more invisible it seems to the avoidant. It fades into the background of their daily life like air. Always present, always taken for granted, only noticed when it's gone. Another reason the avoidant takes the warmth for granted is that they often mistake it for weakness. Because the empath doesn't retaliate with anger or abandon them, when they retreat, the avoidant assumes the empath will always bend, always forgive, always accept the crumbs of connection they are willing to give. What they fail to see is that the empath's warmth is not born of fragility, but of strength. It takes immense resilience to keep showing up with love in the face of rejection or distance. Yet, until the empath finally decides to step back, the avoidant rarely understands the strength that has been holding the relationship together all along. There's also an unconscious dependency at play. The avoidant tells themselves they don't need closeness, yet they keep circling back to the empath's presence. They lean on the warmth as a hidden source of security, even as they deny needing it. This contradiction allows them to use the empath's love as both a refuge and a shield while refusing to acknowledge its true value. Only when the warmth is finally withdrawn does the avoidant realize that what they assumed would always be available was, in fact, a gift that could vanish the moment it stopped being honored. When the empath withdraws, it creates a permanent shift because the energy they bring into a relationship is not something that can be replaced once it is gone. For a long time, the empath offers warmth, patience, and unconditional care, even in the face of repeated distance or rejection. The avoidant grows accustomed to this dynamic and unconsciously relies on it, believing that the empath will always be there to provide love without limit. But when the empath finally reaches the point where they no longer give in the same way, it marks a turning point that cannot be undone. Their warmth is not something they switch on and off like a light. It is a deeply rooted part of their nature. And once they decide to redirect it away from the avoidant, it does not return in the same form. This shift is so powerful because it is not an act of revenge or punishment. The empath doesn't withdraw to teach the avoidant a lesson or to play a game. They withdraw because they have realized, sometimes after years of giving, that their love is not being honored. They see that their warmth has been taken as a guarantee rather than as the extraordinary gift it truly is. And when an empath comes to this realization, their entire approach to the relationship changes. They stop overextending, they stop over-explaining, and they stop pouring themselves into someone who cannot or will not meet them halfway. This shift is rooted in self-respect, which is why it is permanent. For the avoidant, this moment feels jarring because it interrupts a pattern they had come to see as stable. They had built a quiet certainty around the idea that the empath would always bend and always stay, no matter how far they pulled away. When that certainty is shattered, the avoidant is left facing a kind of emptiness they had long avoided confronting. The warmth they once assumed was infinite is gone, and what remains is a silence that cannot be filled with casual distractions or superficial connections. The empath's presence, once overlooked, becomes glaringly significant in its absence. What makes this shift even more impactful is that the empath doesn't usually return to the same level of openness once they've pulled back. Even if they remain in some form of contact with the avoidant, the dynamic is never the same. The empath has recalibrated their boundaries, and that new standard prevents them from falling back into the old cycle of over-giving. The avoidant may attempt to re-engage, to recreate the bond, but they quickly discover that the warmth no longer flows as it once did. The empath has learned to reserve it for those who can truly appreciate and reciprocate it. This is why the shift is permanent. The avoidant is not just losing a person. They are losing a rare experience of love that they cannot manufacture on their own. Once the empath withdraws, the avoidant is forced to confront the reality that the fire they depended on has gone out and nothing they do can fully reignite it. The warmth is not withheld. It has simply been redirected, and that decision closes a chapter forever. The avoidant's greatest fear is not rejection, but the loss of the empath's unique presence, because rejection is something they have prepared for their entire lives. They expect it, they anticipate it, and in many ways, they protect themselves against it by keeping their walls high and their distance intact. Rejection confirms the narrative they already believe, that closeness is dangerous and people cannot be trusted. But the loss of the empath's warmth is different. It is not just another person walking away. It is the disappearance of a love that carried qualities they may never encounter again. The empath's presence is not easily replaced, and once it is gone, the avoidant is left with a void that feels far more threatening than simple rejection ever could. The empath offers something that transcends ordinary affection. Their warmth is steady, patient, and unconditional in ways that most people are unable to sustain. They make the avoidant feel understood without demanding change, and they offer acceptance without judgment. This kind of presence creates a safety the avoidant doesn't often allow themselves to feel, a safety that reaches beneath their defenses and speaks directly to the parts of them that are tired of running. Losing that is not like losing any other relationship. It is losing a sanctuary they didn't even know they had been seeking until they found it. What intensifies this fear is that the avoidant knows, on some level, that they played a role in pushing the empath away. Unlike rejection, where they can tell themselves the other person failed to see their worth, the loss of the empath forces them to face the fact that they were loved deeply and still could not receive it fully. The empath didn't walk away because they were blind to the avoidant's value. They walked away because the avoidant could not step into the closeness that was freely offered. This makes the loss heavier because it reveals not just what has been taken, but what has been squandered. The uniqueness of the empath's presence also lies in its irreplaceability. The avoidant can enter new relationships, meet new people, and experience attraction again, but the specific energy the empath brought into their life cannot be replicated. The patience, the warmth, the steady reassurance, the rare blend of strength and compassion, these qualities are not commonly found in one person. Once the avoidant realizes that, they begin to understand that what they lost was not just a partner, but a rare source of emotional nourishment. This recognition often arrives too late, when the empath has already redirected their love elsewhere. It is this sense of irreplaceability that makes the fear so profound. The avoidant can endure rejection because they can always find someone new, someone different to fill the space temporarily. But they cannot escape the memory of what it felt like to be held in the empath's light. That memory becomes a haunting reminder of what they once had and can never fully regain. It is not the fear of someone leaving that shakes them. It is the fear that they will never again encounter the depth of love they once so easily overlooked. So in the end, what every avoidant truly fears isn't the loss of a relationship, it's the loss of that rare, irreplaceable warmth that only a super empath can bring. Because once it's gone, they realize it wasn't just love. It was a mirror that showed them what was possible, a presence that softened their edges, and a sanctuary they never thought they could have. The tragedy is not rejection. The tragedy is that the very person who gave them the safety they longed for is also the one they pushed away. And for the empath, the greatest lesson is that their warmth is powerful, precious, and not something to be poured into someone who cannot hold it with care. Thank you so much for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for valuing these truths about love, connection, and self-worth. It has been an honor to share this with you. Take these words with you, carry them into your relationships, and remember your warmth is not only a gift, it's your power. Thank you, and goodbye.